Where we stood in the ravine, the air was calm. A slightly clammy mist had settled into the snow-filled bowl. But on the heights above, the wind was roaring. It sounded alive, like an immense, unbelievably violent beast, powerful enough to quickly sap our strength and snuff out our insignificant lives. "I don't think we should go up there," I said, exercising my talent for understatement. "Right, no way," my friend quickly agreed, looking behind him to make sure the trail out was still there. A handful of snowboarders were skimming down carefully through the mist. They weren't climbing above the rim of the ravine either. We beat a hasty retreat back to Pinkham Notch, where partly sunny skies and mild spring breezes still prevailed. It was hard to believe that the raging wilderness into which we had peered and from which we had retreated was the same place that on a mild summer day would see lines of tourists clad in shorts and t-shirts picking their way slowly uphill toward the summit buildings and parking lots. But it was. And then the book has a fairly lengthy description, very much indebted to W. Barksdale Maynard, about the history of Walden Pond and the changes that this place has gone through to get to the delightful condition that it is mostly in today. And so Walden Pond today is a mix of the sacred and profane. It was not a wild place when Thoreau lived beside the pond, and it is not a wild place today. A balance has been struck between society's relentless demand for recreation, Lebensraum, fun, and the deep human need that Thoreau expressed for nature's beauty, solitude, and quiet contemplation. You can find both at Walden. In its complexity, the pond is emblematic of almost every other place that Thoreau loved. They are all, to some degree, environmentally complicated. New England's history is long and complex, and its wild places share in that complexity. They all exist in tenuous balance, each place threatened in some way, each place a compromise. Cape Cod's great outer arm, which Thoreau returned to several times for its raw beauty, is less raw today and is no longer an environmental disaster as it was when he went there. It is still beautiful, still essentially untamed because of its proximity to the wild Atlantic Ocean, but it is now part of vacation land, as Thoreau himself predicted it would be. The Cape is now linked to the ever-churning engine of America's recreation economy. Were it not for the protection of the outer Cape offered by the Cape Cod National Seashore, even the Great Beach would long ago have been developed. And you can see that on a map. If you look at a map of Cape Cod, you can see the boundaries of the National Seashore. On the National Seashore side, it's open. On the side that's not protected, it's a grid of roads. It's all developed. The grandeur of the Presidential Range is protected by the White Mountain National Forest, but the summit of Mount Washington, its highest peak, is drastically overdeveloped. A road, begun as a carriage road in Thoreau's time, and a 19th century cog railway now bring tourists to its summit by the hundreds, where they are greeted by a stupendous view, plus communications towers, parking lots, and a large concrete summit building. Mount Monadnock, the mountain that Thoreau returned to most often, is located in a New Hampshire state park which offers it some protection from the many thousands of hikers who climb it. It is a dramatic and interesting mountain close to Boston and the sprawling northeastern megalopolis. As a result, Monadnock is climbed relentlessly by hordes of nature lovers who crowd its summit on sunny days. It is vigorously popular, undeniably overused. Other Massachusetts peaks admired by Thoreau are developed to a greater or lesser degree and are much visited. Wachusett and Greylock have paved summit roads, yet even there you can find free-running brooks and enclaves of wildness on their flanks. The forests of northern Maine that drew Thoreau like a magnet are still New England's largest wild area. They're the largest uninhabited area in the continental United States. Northern Maine has that distinction. Yet the great forests have been, much of it is uninhabited, certifiably wilderness, yet the great forests have been logged repeatedly and now, because of shifting ownership patterns, face the strong possibility of widespread recreational development. Katahdin, the greatest mountain that fascinated Thoreau throughout his life, has been firmly protected thanks to the heroic lifelong campaign of former Maine Governor Percival Baxter. It may be the exception, the one place Thoreau's vision of true wildness in wilderness lives on. Yet even there, the pressure for more access is intense. In summer, cars line up before dawn at the entry gate to Baxter State Park, and Katahdin Summit is seldom deserted. Were it not for the personal fortune of Governor Baxter and his determination that the park remain a wilderness, it too would likely be compromised. Nevertheless, more of Thoreau's New England remains than you might expect. The amazing regenerative power of our major ecosystem, the northern forest, has healed many of the wounds inflicted on the region. The conquered forests that Thoreau walked in are in better shape now than they have been for a century. Cape Cod's once devastated landscape has recovered so thoroughly that open heathlands, which once dominated the outer Cape, have become an increasingly rare environmental community and are protected in some spots. The Cape's shifting sands have been stabilized by a restored forest of pitch pine and scrub oak. The timber cutting and agricultural clearing that had deforested much of New England has ended. Now farming in the region is endangered, and the forests have returned to cover 80% of the land and more. You could argue that the region's overall ecology is better off today than it was 150 years ago. The problem is that we are busily inflicting other, subtler wounds on the wild landscapes and areas of true wilderness that remain. It is now more profitable to develop land in most of the region than it is to farm or log it. And so the working landscape that once typified the region is now being turned into subdivisions, shopping centers, and high-tech industrial parks. Because of the incredible amount of wealth our economic system has created, the same system Thoreau decried early on, many of the new developments, especially in rural northern New England, are vacation homes, occupied only a small part of the year, and thanks to new construction technologies and all that available money, houses can now be built in locations that were inaccessible or marginal before: ridgetops, filled-in wetlands, steep and rocky mountainsides. Consequently, wherever open land is not protected in some fashion by conservation easement, national forest, state park, or whatever, it is likely to be developed.